Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give everyone a few minutes to come in and we'll get started. Good afternoon, happy Valentine's Day, and welcome to today's webinar, Taking IT to the Next Level, Michigan's Professional Development for IT Procurement, Cronin and Awards Finalist Project. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're really glad you're here. This is the third webinar in our 2023 Cronin Awards webinar series, but be sure to check out our upcoming webinars. On Wednesday, February 28th, join us for a look at better relationships, better outcomes, Michigan's Life Cycle Supplier Outreach. Then join us Wednesday, March 13th for a look at Better, Faster, Stronger, Florida's Modernized Quarterly Sales Reports. Registration is open for those and all the webinars in the series. Visit NASPO.org to register and look for the webinars tab in the center of the page. We look forward to seeing you there. At the close of today's presentation, you'll be asked to complete a very brief questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO. Today's presentation is good for one contact hour. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. You can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenter a question, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions may be addressed during the presentation or during a Q&A session after the presentation. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today. We are honored to have with us Karina Batora is the Professional Development Manager for the Department of Technology, Management and Budget, DTMB, Central Procurement Services Office. She manages the training and certification section, where her team designs and develops web-based and instructor-led training and certification programs for procurement professionals statewide, including the Achievement in Michigan Procurement AMP programs. She has been with the Central Procurement Services for over 7 years. Her previous experience includes 15 years with MDHHS in policy and training, as well as a career in purchasing and materials management with General Motors and several auto suppliers. Karina has both a bachelor's and master's degrees from Michigan State University. Go Spartans. We also have Robin Moore. Robin Moore is a curriculum development specialist for the Department of Technology, Management and Budget, Central Procurement Services Office. She has worked for the state of Michigan for 15 years, with 11 years as a trainer for the Department of Health and Human Services and 4 years at Central Procurement. Prior to the state of Michigan, Robin worked in the private sector as a trainer and instructional designer for various IT and multimedia companies, as well as a major museum. Robin has a bachelor's and a master's degree in geology from the University of Texas at Austin and a multimedia certification from the Illinois Institute of Art. And Genevieve Hayes serves as the director of the Policy, Training, and Outreach Division of the Department of Technology, Management and Budget, Central Procurement Services Office. In this capacity, Ms. Hayes oversees multiple support functions that assist Central Procurement Services in delivering its core mission. She has been with Central Procurement Services in a variety of roles for the entire time she has worked at the state, almost 15 years. Ms. Hayes has an MBA from Wayne State University in Detroit and a Bachelor of General Studies from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. NASPO is grateful to have all of you here with us. And now let's get started.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the State of Michigan's presentation on our project for the 2023 Silver Cronin Award. Thanks for joining us. Today, we'll be talking about our project called the IT Foundational Concepts, which is part of our Michigan Achievement in Michigan Procurement, or AMP, 1+IT Certification Training Program. My name is Karuna Batora, and as Talise said, I'm with the State of Michigan Central Procurement Services Office. I'll be one of 3 individuals presenting today. Our professional development team, which is responsible for creation of this project, includes Genevieve Hayes, who's our Director of Policy, Training, and Outreach, and 3 curriculum development specialists, Robin Moore, Susan Doyle, and Rachel Doyle. I'm the Professional Development Manager, and both Genevieve and Robin will be joining me in this presentation. Let's start out by talking about why the IT Foundational Concepts curriculum was created and how we got started. So, as procurement professionals, you may have noticed that information technology is in almost everything. So many purchases, both commodities and services, have IT components. Services may have personal data stored in the cloud or transmitted between systems, and commodities may have ordering portals or apps as part of the Internet of Things. In IT procurement, there are additional complexities and risks that are involved with the procurement. We need to have adequate tools and training in place so that sourcing staff have the information they need to adequately process IT purchases and mitigate risk to our state. As part of mitigating risk, it's really critical to reinforce policy to make sure that the right people are involved in the IT procurement. So as part of our training, we wanted to define and highlight who in the state of Michigan is authorized to purchase IT commodities and services, and make sure that they identify and involve the right stakeholders for the IT procurement processes. So we have a question for you. Our team would like to know if your state is currently working on any IT procurement training. In a moment, a poll will appear on your screen to give you the opportunity to respond. We'd really appreciate if you would respond. So a poll is on its way. And if you would select yes or no. Thank you again for voting. In just a moment, we'll be getting the responses up. So this is really interesting and exciting information. So I see that 46% of the people who responded actually say that you're working on IT procurement training. And we really hope that we can help you as you move forward and vice versa, because that's really important. While those of you who said no aren't working on it today, perhaps the things that we're going to be sharing with you will help you move forward if that's something that you're interested in. So thank you so much for responding to that poll. It's kind of exciting. I wasn't sure how many people were actually working on it. So let's look at how our plan was developed. So after compiling and reviewing our state's IT procurement policy, the IT stakeholders were consulted. Everyone had a different idea of what IT procurement should be and what must be included. Now, simply jumping into the IT procurement steps was not the place to start. Instead, going back a little further to the foundations of IT, was the favored approach. Using input from the stakeholders and the Central Procurement Services Management Team, some key areas of focus were identified. So an IT glossary was developed so that definitions could be used that everyone would understand. This includes terms such as networking, hosting, and the Internet of Things. Another goal was to make sure that our target audience would be able to utilize the state of Michigan policy, which defines IT, so that it is clear as to what can be purchased and by whom. Now, additionally, the state of Michigan IT procurement process has many stakeholders involved in order to mitigate risk and make sure that staff with IT expertise are involved in those purchasing decisions. Our research found that sometimes key stakeholders had been omitted from the process because, frankly, their involvement was not fully defined. In the past, buyers were unclear as to whom to contact and who should be involved. As a result, our training clearly identifies the who's who in the IT procurement process. Now, the state of Michigan has a very specific process in place to hire IT staffing, a very different process than hiring services or contractors for other purposes. As requested by our Central Procurement Management and the stakeholder teams, these steps are communicated in the IT staffing module. As a result of the complexity of IT purchases, there are a lot of questions and confusion when purchasing software licenses and understanding data security requirements. They present procurement with high risks and a lot of red flags. Now, both were introduced individually through comprehensive training with a focus on risk reduction. We have a standard contract terms class that's presented by our Attorney General's office, where each term is discussed individually. And due to the importance of the IT specialized contract terms, the Attorney General's office partnered with us to develop our IT contract terms instructor-led class. This class discusses the extensive and specialized terms for IT procurements, and they walk through them line by line. It's been very helpful. The name AMP1 plus IT, which you can see at the top of our slide, leverages the solicitation and contract development content taught in our Achievement in Michigan Procurement Level 1 certification program. Plus, it adds the IT procurement component. Since AMP Level 1 is a certification program, it was decided that AMP1 plus IT should be too. The basis for the state of Michigan IT procurement curriculum includes the IT foundational concepts. The creation of these foundational concepts is just the first step that we plan in the development of a more comprehensive IT training program. We have more planned for the future. This diagram shows the 6 parts of those IT foundational concepts. The first 5 are web-based trainings, and the last one is an instructor-led class for those IT contract terms and conditions. To get the training to our people quickly, we released the first 3 modules together, along with a related certification test. The second grouping of modules were later released with their own certification test as well. The content was divided into 2 parts with 2 separate certification tests so that people can take it independently through the state's learning management system. I would now like to turn this over to Robin Moore, our Senior Curriculum Development Specialist, who will discuss each of these courses, how they're developed, and what is included. And later, our Director, Genevieve Hayes, will conclude this presentation with a discussion about how your state can use this information for your own training, working together to give us all better training products. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinna. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Moore, and I'm a Curriculum Development Specialist for the State of Michigan's Central Procurement Services. Now, before I give you a snapshot of each of the modules in the IT Foundational Concepts, I want to talk a little bit about our training methodology for this project. Now, if you're currently working on your own IT procurement training program, and it sounds like about half of you are, I'm really hoping that this will prepare you for some of the challenges that you might encounter, because we certainly had some. Uh, it's likely that most of you are using some version of like the ADDIE training methodology. Maybe you're using Agile, maybe you're using something a lot like Agile. So you'll get the idea. But we're going to walk through these steps in order, kind of in the ADDIE process, starting with analyze or analysis. So for analysis, even though this project had an accelerated timeline to it, there was a huge amount of time spent in the analysis phase. And we were researching processes, and we spent a lot of time, kind of assembling the team, so to speak. And we also spent a lot of time narrowing down what our target audience needed to know. And this whole analysis process for this project was really akin to kind of sipping through a fire hose. There was so much information. There were also a lot of processes that were owned by other divisions. And those processes, some of them were undergoing redesign themselves. So that made it really challenging to work with these other groups and try to establish our own final content. So, like one of the processes that was undergoing redesign was a readiness process, which is really getting ready to promote an IT idea to an IT project. And we had to wait, we had to work with them, and we had to try and figure out how to factor that information into our own training. So in addition to making, that challenging, we just had a really large project to work on. And we probably spent, more time on the analysis phase of the project than probably all the other phases put together. So let's move on to design. So in our design step, we always use a variety of different design methods, kind of depending upon the needs of the project. The IT foundational concepts are mostly web-based trainings, and we used Articulate 360 Rise and Storyline for development. We also have a little bit of narrated video that we captured using Camtasia Studio. We use a lot of interactive content blocks in our training. We, of course, try to use meaningful and relevant graphics. We also have quiz and test questions that are tied directly to our learning objectives to reinforce learning. Like a lot of other procurement training programs we create, we make corresponding reference guides for each of our web-based trainings. This gives everyone a really easy way to reference that information at a later time. Our IT terms and conditions class, again, was a little bit different. We have 5 web-based trainings, 1 instructor-led class. So that was IT terms and conditions. And this was designed in accordance with the Attorney General's office. So our assistant attorney generals were delivering it, and they do that using a live document. Now, because they're lawyers, they request no recordings, no other literature. So there's only one reference guide that goes with that. So let's move on to how we developed it. So once our topics and training designs were established, our teams worked with the assigned subject matter experts that we had to develop the content. And again, we also researched a lot of this content on our own as the, curriculum development specialist goes. So I read an awful lot about IT. Using the learning objectives that we established in the analysis phase, we created outlines and then more detailed content from that. Fortunately, if you are also a user of Articulate 360, you know it is easy to actually develop directly in the tool itself instead of having to storyboard things out. So again, that makes the development process a lot easier when you're using those tools. We had many different touch points and review cycles on the way to make sure that we were on track with the intent of the different modules. Our review sessions were mostly in the form of facilitated walkthroughs, where we actually met in person with two different levels of review teams. We had a SME level who was helping us develop the content. And then we also had an executive level. So the executive level were our managers and directors who were kind of in charge of approving the content and also making sure that we were providing the correct direction for this training. So when we met with them, we read through the materials and we made updates kind of on the fly right during those meetings. And again, fortunately, Articulate Rise makes it really easy to be able to make changes even when you're in the middle of a meeting. And we also leveraged Review 360 for internal reviews. So I guess actually we had three levels of review on these between our SME teams, our executive teams, and also our internal team itself reviewing. All right, let's move on to implementation. So as Corinna mentioned a little earlier, in order to deliver the content timely, we broke the content into two different parts, and we had two separate implementation stages. Now, following the completion of the first three modules, we put together the certification test questions. And again, those were directly based on the learning objectives. After review and finalization, the tests were implemented using the test engine in our learning management system, and then they were tied into a curriculum. So again, we're kind of running through this all in our learning management system so people can access these courses and take them as they have time for. And we essentially did the same for the second part, our modules 4 through 6. And I guess if you look at it, we effectively had two different rollouts because of the way we split up our programs. Now, after our implementation, we ran a pilot period where we evaluated the different modules and the certification tests. Now, we did this specifically for central procurement services first. And then after a period of feedback and changes to it, we released the training modules to the rest of the state of Michigan agencies. The certification tests were developed specifically for central procurement staff as well as financial services staff. So the rest of the agencies don't actually take the certification part currently. In between our pilot release and our agency release, we probably had a good, I'm going to say 3 months or so where we did those changes, and when we finally released it to the rest of the agencies. If we think about a timeline for this project of creating those foundational concepts, we probably spent about a year working on this whole project. Now, before we kind of take a look at a snapshot of these different modules, I want to pause at this time to see if anybody has any questions about our project background, the training methodology that we used, or any of the information that Corinna discussed in the first part. So does anyone have any questions for us?
All right, Robin, looks like we've got some questions coming in.
Okay, great.
We have one here. How often do you plan to update the course material?
That's a really good question. So we actually have kind of two different methods where we update course materials. we have policy changing constantly, as I'm sure everybody else does as well. So anytime there is a policy change that has a direct impact to the training, we have to go back and make our changes. So that's kind of one time frame. We also have a yearly review of all of our different materials. So we send those out to specific groups and it's usually our stakeholders for that training, the SMEs that we worked with and the owners of it. And we have them review, and then we make any updates that they suggest on their end. As far as like other, for modules, online modules, that's kind of how we handle that. For instructor-led classes, we're always receiving evaluations after the class, and we very frequently make changes kind of in between our classes to those materials. Again, because feedback from our students is very important, and we want to make sure that we are listening to them, that they feel listened to, and that we're constantly improving what we create. Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute right now.
There we go. You mentioned the instructor-led classes. For those classes, what kind of participation rates have you seen, and have they been consistent?
I believe we launched our first IT contract terms and conditions class about a year ago. It was probably, I think, last March was our first one, and we usually cap our classes like that at 100 participants, and I believe that one we were right near the cap. Since then, the amount has dropped. We probably have maybe, I'm going to say an average of about 45 people in each of our classes. Now, that is specifically the IT terms and conditions class. We have a standard contract terms and conditions class, which is open to really any like purchasing professional, or even they don't have to be purchasing professionals, but that's open to others in the state of Michigan. And that class gets more people consistently. Now, again, IT purchasing for the state of Michigan is limited. We have a very small group of people who are actually able to make those purchases. So we don't have necessarily the same audience for our IT terms and conditions as we do for our standard. So it is smaller, but it's still, we hold this class 3 times a year, and we have not had any problems making our minimum number of registries.
And I'm going to try to fit 2 more very quick ones in here. Are Michigan's IT terms and conditions available publicly? If so, is there a link?
Yes. So our IT terms and conditions classes are not public. Those are internal to state of Michigan only. We also do have requirements for registering for those internally as well. So I'm so sorry, I cannot share that with you.
And are your ILT classes held in person, like face-to-face, or are they virtual, or some hybrid of both?
We actually have all of our ILT classes online right now, virtual. We used to have I'm trying to think, the IT terms and conditions was designed, within the last year. So that was virtual. We did have some in-person classes for our Achievement in Michigan Level 1. And we stopped doing those like everybody else during COVID. We stopped doing those in person and converted to online. And since we have converted to online classes, we have not had any, I'm going to say we haven't had any, a decrease in the quality and the feedback. People are happy with it. It's much more convenient for them. It saves a lot of costs for printing as well as travel. So Right now, we are planning to continue with our online classes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks for those questions. We're going to have time for more questions later on. So if you have some more, and I think there are still some more in the Q&A, I will get to those in a little bit. All right, I'm going to move on, and we're going to actually look at some snapshots of the different modules that comprise the IT fundamental concepts. When I say snapshot, I'm not going to show you like the whole thing. We get a couple screens worth, but you will have the opportunity to look at the whole project a little bit later, and we'll tell you how to access that information. So the first module that I want to talk about in the IT foundational concepts is the Introduction to IT Procurement. And this module begins with a story about risk. And that was really one of the key themes that we wanted to carry throughout this training program. So, and as you can see on your screen, it is literally a story. So we have to put a book in there for you. This module also focuses on IT terminology and identifying stakeholders. In the IT terminology lesson, it describes different technology types, anything like SaaS, SaaS, software as a service, COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software, lots of different terms for different IT kind of devices and methods. All of the terminology that we introduced in this lesson, it really creates a baseline for later modules that are part of the IT foundational concepts. The terminology is also tied directly into our IT glossary, which is another resource for the training program. Also in this module, we focus on stakeholders. And the lessons on stakeholders describe their roles in the IT procurement process, including when they should be involved, how they should be notified as well. Again, that's so important to know how you actually notify somebody who is supposed to be involved with your procurement. And this is important because in some cases, stakeholders are already involved in the IT procurement by the time the IT solicitation manager is assigned to the project. And at other times, it is up to the IT solicitation manager to reach out and pull that stakeholder in. And again, we wanted to make sure they knew when to do that and how to do that. This particular module also has a very comprehensive resources section, and it contains a list of different Michigan IT policy publications, reference guides, and contact information for the different stakeholder divisions. Each module in the IT foundational concepts also has a corresponding reference guide, which I believe I mentioned earlier. And there is one with this module as well. As far as the development goes for this module, we primarily used Articulate Rise 360 to create it, but there's also a couple storyline pieces in different sections where Rise really didn't have the functionality or the flexibility that we needed to really portray what we wanted to portray and provide good interactivity. So the screenshot on the slide here shows one of the storyline interactives where you can click a stakeholder name and see a pop-up screen that tells you more about their role and how they're involved in IT purchases. And again, we use this method because we just needed a lot more real estate than what Rise offers in their interactive content blocks. So that is our introduction to IT procurement. Our next module is called the Purchasing Matrix. And The Purchasing Matrix web-based training is a comprehensive walkthrough of an existing resource that procurement professionals in the state of Michigan are required to use per policy. And it is in case you're wondering what the Purchasing Matrix is, it is not a sci-fi environment. It is a large spreadsheet, and it breaks down the different IT categories according to state of Michigan's definition of IT. And then it also shows who and what needs to be involved and who does the actual purchasing based on the type of IT and the dollar amount. In addition to being part of the IT foundational concepts, this module was designed to be used by anyone in the state of Michigan looking for more information about the purchasing matrix. And again, our purchasing matrix is a reference document that is available to everyone in the state. It is not just reserved for purchasing professionals. So this particular module is an Articulate Rise module, and it also has an embedded video walkthrough of the purchasing matrix. The video walkthrough was created using Camtasia, and we had a lot of editing and pieces for that. After the trainees go through the walkthrough, they have to complete a series of interactive scenarios and use the actual purchasing matrix reference tool to determine who is going to make the purchase based on given criteria. So on the slide, you can see part of one of those scenarios. And I just want to add, we had such a wonderful opportunity to use the matrix as a theme here. So of course we did. So yeah, so this module has a nice matrix movie theme. All right, our next module is IT staff augmentation. And this is a short and straightforward web-based training that describes the process for hiring contracted IT staff for the state of Michigan. It describes the roles and the systems used, as well as the step-by-step process for the procurement. This process is based on using an established pre-qualified staffing contractor. This particular module was created using Rise 360, and it makes use of a lot of the different interactive content blocks, such as like the accordion blocks, as well as the stepped process blocks in Articulate. Our fourth module is the software licensing web-based training. And this module focuses on understanding key concepts and terminology that you might find in a software license. And this includes understanding that a software license is a contract and that software licenses are written to favor the licensor and not the licensee. This module discusses the relative rights between the licensor and the licensee. It also describes the differences between expressed and implied warranties. Most importantly, in keeping with our theme of mitigating risk, the software licensing module describes some of the red flags that licensors include in license agreements. It also includes information about how to work with your Attorney General's staff and office in order to identify those. This particular module was built using Rise 360, and it contains a lot of custom graphics that we put in there, as well as examples. The last web-based training module is data security provisions in IT contracts. Now, when our training team was first approached about training data security. We wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating any information that's included in other data security training that's mandated by the state. I'm sure everyone out there has taken lots of different data security training of one sort, just as general risk management for an IT world. So we wanted to make sure and make it very clear that this particular module was about assessing the data security of the IT purchase and how that factors into the data security language found in the IT contract. So the main themes in this module include IT terminology around data, state data as we define it in policy, data security versus privacy, and of course, risk. This module is a good example of sipping from a fire hose because we had to be really careful to keep it in scope and focused on what the buyer needs to know to do their job versus what an IT expert should know. So again, did so much research and on this particular project. And this one went through a lot of different revisions and rewrites to really focus the information. One example of that is we initially analyzed, including a lesson on data classification. But after actually writing up the data classification section for this, we found it was really too technical for what our target audience needed to know. And we also had to conclude that it was covered in separate training that was owned by a different agency at the state of Michigan. So we decided not to include information like that. This particular module, like the others, was created in RISE 360. All right, we have our sixth and final, I hate calling it a module. To me, modules are always web-based training, but this is the sixth piece of the IT fundamental concepts. So this is the IT contract terms and conditions instructor-led class. This class is actually hosted by our Attorney General's staff. They do not want anyone speaking on their behalf about contract terms, so they actually give the class. And it highlights specific terms that are unique to our IT contracts. And as part of the class, they open up a copy of the IT contract terms and they walk through them one by one. And what they do is they really break down some of the lawyer speak that's in our contracts into more understandable concepts. This class is not only for our IT procurement professionals, but it's also for our program managers across the state who manage contracts with IT. This is a 3-hour class that is taught online through Microsoft Teams, and we host this class 3 times a year. It does require that our attendees take our standard contract terms and conditions class first as prerequisite. So that is kind of a run through of our 6 different parts of the IT fundamental concepts. As a reminder, these modules are only part of our overall AMP1 Plus IT training program. We have plans to continue this program following in the footsteps of our existing Procurement 6 training flow. And you can kind of see that on the screen, where we have the 6 steps in our solicitation process, starting with analyze the need and going through contract management, with the specific steps of analyze the need, solicitation development, evaluation process, and contract development identified as having unique IT components to them. We don't have a time frame to finish our AMP1 plus IT program yet, due to other initiatives that we're currently working on. But we will definitely keep NASPO posted when we start working on these pieces again. So with that, I want to pause again for another Q&A session. And I think I've been kind of looking on the side at the Q&A panel. I know there's more questions that have been coming in. So.
All right. We've got one here. It says you all used Articulate 360 as one of your softwares to build this. How was that software chosen, and were there any other major considerations?
Let's see. Articulate 360 is kind of an industry standard now. I personally have been using different software tools to create computer-based training to web-based training since 1993. And I first started out using, when Articulate first came out, it was storyline only, and then they kind of expanded into the Articulate 360 suite with Rise. We like these tools because they are fairly easy to use. They still have a lot of power with them, especially if you're combining storyline with Rise. And they really make, I would say, development on the fly, kind of rapid development, an easy process. And they're also, especially since like we use the Teams version of Articulate 360, which has nothing to do with Microsoft Teams for people who are not familiar with the Articulate suite. But it allows different team members of your development group to work on the same modules and collaborate in them. And that is such a wonderful thing. So we can work on different parts of the same modules and essentially share the content, and also create content blocks that we can share across different projects. So that's really one of the reasons. Again, I have not used anything better than Articulate 360 as a whole in quite a few years.
I've got another question that may have just a hint of ambiguity in it. So I'm going to ask it two different ways. First, is there an IT terms and conditions template that is available? And what I think this could potentially mean is, say, the state of Michigan's IT contract, like your standard terms and conditions you use in IT contracts, are those available to the public?
Those are not available to the public. We actually keep our IT contract under close wraps. And again, it's because not all purchasing professionals in the state of Michigan can buy IT. Only select people can. So it's actually even hard to get internally if you don't have a real reason for needing it. So unfortunately, I do not have one to share if that is what you're looking for.
So maybe another way this question could be pointed. For the IT terms and conditions module as part of the training, is there a template, like an outline maybe of the materials that are covered in that module?
So before I give away too much, Genevieve is going to be up next after me, and she's going to take you through what materials that we are sharing with you. So I think we'll be revealing that in just a little bit.
Excellent. I've got one more I'll try to fit in here. How do you make sure participants are not just clicking through the content without actually reading and understanding it? The asker says they're looking to create more training using Rise 360, but fear that users may be able to just simply click through the training.
Okay, so that is more of a like an instructional design question. And I think as a trainer, we're constantly trying to make our training interesting and make ways for people to interact with it. So they have to go through different steps before they can just click through. I think one of the struggles as a trainer, there is always going to be people who just click through as fast as they can because their goal is to complete it as fast as possible and not actually get anything out of it. So there's different methods of doing that. One, and again, you're talking, this is another 3-hour webinar that you have that I could do to answer this question. But again, try to make your training visually interesting. There's dividers that you can use in Articulate 360. So you make them understand the content and provide them with a divider that they have to click before they move on. Intersperse questions to reinforce their knowledge. Ask them, you want to check, you want to do a knowledge check to see if they actually did learn anything from that section and can apply it. So it's more of a design process rather than the tool itself.
Thank you so much, Robin.
All right. I think we are going to go on to the next part. I'm going to turn this over to Genevieve, and she's going to take you through the last part of this presentation and wrap things up for you.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. Again, I'm Genevieve Hayes, and I'm the Director of the Policy, Training, and Outreach Division at the State of Michigan Central Procurement Services Office. And I'd like to talk a little about the resources that are available for the AMP1 Plus IT training program Robin alluded to just a second ago. And each of the web-based training modules in the IT foundational concepts has a corresponding reference guide. And these reference guides, along with other resource documents, are compiled in the AMP1 Plus IT body of knowledge, what we also refer to as a BOC. The AMP1 Plus IT BOC also contains the following resources: an instructions document for the AMP1 Plus IT training and certification program, the IT glossary, which contains key IT definitions found in the training program, a copy of the purchasing matrix reference tool that Robin discussed, a companion reference guide for the IT contract terms and conditions class, and a copy of the reference guide, which is called Determining if a Solicitation Has an IT Component and How to Proceed. And I'm just going to address that question that came in just a moment ago about our terms and conditions, our IT terms and conditions, and whether or not they're available. Anyone that's listening to this webinar is free to go to our website and take a look at any of our publicly posted IT contracts, because we post them all, and you will see our IT terms and conditions in those contracts if you want to get a feel for what provisions we have. Granted, they may have been or probably were negotiated to some extent with the vendors and may differ contract by contract, but again, they're publicly posted. So feel free to do that. One second here. The last component of the AMP1 Plus IT training program that I want to share with you is the certification requirements. In order to become certified for AMP1 Plus IT, you have to first be AMP Level 1 certified, and then take and pass each of the 2 tests with the passing grade of 80% or greater. Unlike our AMP Level 1 training, where the tests are scheduled and proctored, these tests are available at any time to trainees through our Learning Management System test engine. The tests each have about 35 questions based on the training objectives from the different modules, and trainees have 1 hour to complete them. We don't restrict how many times they can be taken to get a passing grade. After taking the modules, students have the BOC to study with, as well as a sample test. Upon passing and completing each section of the IT foundational concepts, students can print out certificates directly from the learning management system. So hopefully this brief look at the 6 modules gave you an idea of what we developed for our IT foundational concepts, as well as why we developed what we did. Another reason we developed our own curriculum was because we couldn't find another certification program out there that checked all the boxes for what we wanted. And as a side note, this was not an easy topic to develop training for. We had many stakeholders who wanted and needed to have representation in this training, and it was very challenging to give them an equal voice while still staying in scope. In addition to the topic's complexity, the underlying theme of risk mitigation also gave it a fairly serious tone. So we had to incorporate some innovative techniques to engage our audience, like using multiple approaches to the training, and even adding a walk into a bar joke, which is something I've never seen before in a formal training program. But jokes aside, what we ended up with was a cohesive IT training program that laid the foundations for IT procurement. We believe it's also the first IT procurement certification program among the states. As you know, training programs, even those involving high-risk topics, don't always have immediate measurable results. We do envision that the AMP 1+ IT training program will have a future impact on cost savings involving IT procurements because it promotes accountability and provides staff with the skills and knowledge they need to perform their job requirements, reduce audit findings, and increase compliance. Anything we can do to mitigate the failure rate of IT contracts is worthwhile because they often have high costs involved. So let's talk a minute about how you can use the content. Although there are a lot of specific references to state of Michigan policies and process, there is also more generic content that you could leverage to use for IT training for your state. The Introduction to IT Procurement module contains a lot of common IT terminology that could be reused. You may not have the same stakeholders as we do in the state of Michigan, but the approach we use to introduce who they are, what they do, and when they should be involved could be a good base for your training. We also have more generic content in the software licensing and data security provisions in IT contracts modules that could be reused. For example, the section on red flags within license agreements applies to any state or entity purchasing a software license agreement, not just Michigan. The information about data security versus data privacy is also relevant to any state purchasing IT, as it references federal requirements and other things. And lastly, the IT glossary is a great resource to reuse. It contains common IT terms as well as specific IT terms that are used throughout the IT foundational concept modules. Okay, so now we are going to do another poll. So I'm going to wait a second here. There we go. Poll question is, do you have any IT procurement training that your state would be willing to share? So please select yes or no. Okay, what do we have here? 95% of the people do not have training that they're able to share, and 5% do. Okay, interesting. So the 5% that do may want to mention that in a NASPO listserv or something like that. You can take a look at it. Okay. So let's talk about our materials for just a moment here as we close out. So if you're wondering where to obtain our materials, I'm going to get into that right now. The state of Michigan has built an Adobe Connect classroom that gives you access to the materials anytime you want. We have a slide with an overview of the program, contact information for Corinna and Robin, and 2 pods with links to our materials. One pod has all the resource documents that I talked about earlier, including an editable Word file for the IT glossary. The other pod has links to the 5 web-based training modules. We also have one pod with a link to a survey that we would love for you to fill out to give us your feedback about this training program. We'd be very grateful if you did that. Okay. So I'm going to close out here. I know we have some questions, but thanks so much for joining us today. If you have any other questions, it looks like there might be a few in there still. We have some time left that we could do that. If you've got to run, you can also reach out to any of us, Robin, Corinna, or myself, at the email address shown there on the screen, which is dtmb-procurementtraining@michigan.gov, or contact us individually. Okay, thank you so much. Let's take a look at any remaining questions. Looks like there might be one.
Do have one. Are there any challenges or issues with buy-in from your purchasers and staff when you implemented this new training process? And if so, do you have any strategies for how you managed to get everyone on board?
You mean buy-in, the training?
Yes.
I don't think we had an issue with that because this training was demanded by our staff over the years. They really, really wanted something. So we had an enthusiastic group of folks that were clamoring for it and or helping to develop it. I mean, we did have the difficulties that Robin described, earlier, as far as getting agreement on a way a process might be defined, or maybe it really wasn't totally defined. But I think everybody clearly saw the need for it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment.
Okay, well, again, feel free to reach out later if something occurs to you. And we're very happy to have this opportunity to present this information to you. Thanks so much.
All right, that concludes today's presentation. I want to thank our presenters, Corinna, Robin, and Genevieve, for the valuable information they've shared today and for working with us here at NASPO to bring it to you. Thank you all for attending this webinar today. You will all receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and materials. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for your continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be available for viewing on the NASPO YouTube page in the coming days. Questions entered into the chat and Q&A boxes have been saved, and we will try to follow up via email for any ones not addressed during the presentation. Don't forget to check out the upcoming webinars and other events at NASPO.org. Thanks again to our wonderful presenters, and thank you to our guests. Have a great Valentine's Day, everybody.